Okay. Bava Batra, design of good. Next week's not Hanukkah, right? It's on 2 weeks. All right. So, B'ezras Hashem, I'll share next week, but I think the week of Hanukkah we'll probably miss. Yeah. Actually, I started getting the shir back in Modi'in, and we moved from Modi'in to here. This is shir number 250. So that's like a milestone on a personal level. That's it. That's all I'd say about that. Anyway, okay. So the
25 is the
my name is Reish Nun is gematria. My name Reish Nun is gematria 250. It's also ner. That's good too. Cafe Kaful Eser is ner. That's good. Ner, it's 250. That's what he said. So the light of the shiur should illuminate. Okay. All right, Bava Batra said Zayin B'Nav. So we're in the middle of the discussions about Eov in the Gemara. It's going through and expounding various psukim in Eov. This week I think is a little bit shorter than usual and more halachic than usual. Just I kind of got caught on a tangent of exploring certain halachic topics, and it ties back to the midrash that we'll start with. And in the end, we'll try to kind of add a potential kind of layer to what is addressed on the halachic sense to our Gemara. We'll just dive in, and then today we'll understand what I'm talking about. So the Gemara Bava Batra and Daf Tet Zayin B'Nav says as follows: Al da'atcha ki lo ersha ve'en biyadcha matzil. And so Eov is complaining or protesting against Hashem, tzaddik veralo. So he says here, right, only al da'atcha, in other words, addressing Hashem, you know ki lo ersha, that I haven't done anything wrong. Ve'en biyadcha matzil, but there's nothing that I can do. If you decide to punish me, I'm a puppet at your whim. Where's the justice in that, right? Amar Rava said, Bikesh Eov liftor et kol ha'olam kulo min adin. Rava said, what Eov is really saying here is that he's trying to exempt the entire world from the concept of judgment. How so? Amar לפניו ריבונו של עולם, בראת השור פרסותיו סדוקות, בראת חמור פרסותיו קלוטות. Okay, you've created, Master of the Universe, you've created an ox who has split hooves, and you've created a donkey who has joined hooves that are not split. Barata Gan Eden, Barata Ginam. You created Gan Eden and Ginam. Barata Tzadikim, Barata Reshaim. Mi me'akev al yadcha. You created Tzadikim and Reshaim. Who can stop you? So what point is Eov arguing here?
This claim there's no free will?
Yeah. He's essentially saying, if someone's a tzaddik, it's because they were born with a certain inclination and they were raised with a certain environment that they were predetermined to be a tzaddik.
The whole list is the characteristics that you're not capable of affecting, except for the last two, which are behavioral. So it doesn't I don't.
But so that's the argument that he's making here. Is that on a surface level, we'll dive into if there's more significance to the shor and Chamor. That's the focus. But on a surface level, he's saying just as an animal is instinctual and can't decide, one way or the other, how it lives its life. So to a tzaddik, he's born a tzaddik. So to a rasha, is born a rasha. There's no free will. It's determined. Hashem, you created someone with a certain inclination, a certain proclivity to do good or bad things, and so that's what Eov is arguing. And therefore, Rava says, Bikesh Eov liftor kol ha'olam kulo min adin. In other words, if people have a predetermined kind of inclination to do one thing or the other, so then you can't fault them for the way they act or reward them. And so, therefore, there's no such thing as judgment. Okay? Now, that's not the claim Eov makes in the Pshat. This is Rava's drasha, right? But he's taking it to a place of, everything is determined and, materialistic worldview. There's no such thing as free will. Then Eov's friends, they answer him in the discussion. So they say, So they say to him, this is a quote from the Pasuk, so you have torn up the concept of fear in heaven and any kind of discussion before Hashem, which Rava explains to mean, There's a famous idea, it appears in Kiddushin as well, right? Hashem created the Yetzer Hara, but then Hashem created the Torah as an antidote to the Yetzer Hara. In other words, his friends answered him, you're wrong, there is free will, and not only is there free will, but to combat the Yetzer Hara, Hashem created the Torah, which is meant to be a handbook, a tool for us in order to overcome the Yetzer Hara. Okay, so they insist on that, Ikar Emunah, whereas Eov, according to Rav, is claiming that there's no such thing. Okay, just kind of as a quick aside, the Anaf Yosef kind of clarifies what exactly that means, right? The Barati lo Torah Tavlin. והנה פשוט הוא, שאם הבורא לא ברא למכה הזו אלא רפואה הזו, אי אפשר בשום פנים שירפא האדם ואת המכה הבלתי זאת הרפואה. So he says, so it has to be that Hashem, right, if he created the Makkah, which is the Yetzer Hara, that he also we should use the refuah that he created, namely the Torah. Anyone who thinks they can save themselves from the Yetzer Hara other than using the refuah, which is the Torah, is mistaken. Right? People who think they can overcome the Yetzer Hara using other means will find out that they're wrong. Right? He'll see at the end when he dies in his sin. Right? The Yetzer Hara is very sneaky. It can trick people into it can get stronger and stronger without people even realizing that it's holding sway over them. Right? But if a person tries all the different remedies out there, but he doesn't take the proper one, which is the Torah, right? The Torah was created for this purpose. I'm not sure what that part means. Okay, so the Anaf Yosef just elaborates on this a little bit. So it was kind of a nice way to explain the significance of the Torah Tavlin as being bedavka, right? Don't think that there's other ways to overcome the Yetzer Hara. The Torah is the only refuah for the Makkah. Okay, like I said just a few minutes ago, I kind of got drawn into, and Joe, I think you kind of alluded to this in a bit of a different way, which is, I found it strange that Yov has three statements one after the other that are clearly parallel to one another, right? It says, Barāt Prasothiv Sdukot, Barāt Chamor, Prasothiv Klutot. Right? So he says an ox has split hooves and a donkey doesn't have split hooves. There's Gan Eden and Gehinnom, and then there's a tzaddik and there's a rasha. But what does the ox and the donkey have to do with anything? It seems like a strange way to open this discussion. Okay, good. Yeah, so one is Tameh, one is Tameh, and therefore what?
השור יצא לטהור, החמור יצא לטמא, כאילו אין מה לעשות. זאת אומרת שיובם, אין לך פה ברירה, אין לך פה...
Okay.
Purity and purity.
The shor didn't choose to be tahor, just like the tzaddik doesn't choose to be tzaddik. Okay, good. I think that's probably the pshat here. I'll try to explore maybe another way to understand it as well, but I think on the surface, this is a nachon. This took me, like I said, down a bit of a rabbit hole on this concept of shor and chamor. So we'll learn a little bit of some halachic ideas in this context. Okay, so the Gemara Bava Kama and Daf Nadaram and Bet says as follows. It notes that throughout the Torah there's a lot of halachot, and when you go through the list you realize how many there really are, where the Torah says in the context of those halachot, like shor or chamor, or shor v'chamor. And the question from the halachic standpoint is, does that mean shor v'chamor, or is that emblematic of some kind of more general category? Right? We have these ideas of klal upratu klal, and like is it just a av for a broader thing, or is it a specific animal? So we'll see here what the Mishnah says in Bava Kama. Okay, echad shor ve'echad kol be'eman l'nfilat tabor u'lafrashat har Sinai u'letashlume chefer u'lashavat aveda lifrika l'chasima l'kilayim v'lashabat. In each of these areas, the Torah says specifically the word shor. The Mishnah claims whenever it says shor, it means any animal, not just shor. And not only does it mean a domesticated animal like a shor, it means also a wild animal, it means even birds. Im ken, the Mishnah asks, Lama ne'emar shor or chamor? Why does it say shor or chamor in this long list of halachot in the Torah? If it means not ox or donkey, it means any animal or any bird. So why does it say shor chamor? Ela shediber katuv ba'oveh. It means that those were the common cases. Right? The Torah is talking in the context of, usually when you're dealing with aveda or chasima, you're talking about shor chamor, but it's lav dafka. It's not exclusive. Okay. The Gemara says, it goes through this list and tries to understand where it's derived from. And then it gets to the point of kilayim, which was in the list in the Mishnah. Now, what does kilayim mean when it comes to shor v'chamor?
You can't plow together.
They can't plow together. Good. Excellent, right? Lo tachrosh shor v'chamor yachtav. I meant that, right? And there's another kilayim.
You can't like have a child together.
Right, exactly. So there's two different types of kilayim when it comes to animals. There's the kilayim of reviyah, of having the mate, and there's kilayim of charisha, okay? So the Gemara here, it finds a different source for, in other words, it says for each of them that the shor and chamor is lav dafka, but the sources are a bit different. The chilayim, so when the Mishnah says the chilayim, I kilayim the charisha, yalev shor mishabat. So if I want to understand if the animals for kilayim applies to all animals, when it comes to plowing, so I should derive shor from Shabbat. Now, v'kilayim de'arva'a, but if it's about the fact that they can't mate together, so I leave b'emtecha mishabat. So it brings it from different psukim, or different words. L'gabei Shabbat minalan, but why am I saying that it should come from Shabbat? T'tani, Rabbi Yossi omer mishum b'ishmael, b'dibrot rishonot ne'emar, avdecha v'amtecha v'emtecha. Right? In Aseret HaDibrot, b'Shabbat, it says avdecha v'amtecha v'emtecha, b'dibrot ha'achronot, but in Vatchanan, when it gives the second telling of the Aseret HaDibrot, it says shorcha v'chamocha v'chol b'emtecha. Okay, so in the first one it just says b'emtecha, but in the second one it says shamor chamor and b'emtecha. So why add those? Ve'alo shamor v'chamor b'chlal kol be'ema hayu v'lam yatzu. So why mention those explicitly in Vatchanan? Lomar lecha ma shor v'chamor amur kan chayav v'of v'chayotze b'hen av kol chayav v'of v'chayotze b'hen. This is an av for all cases in the Torah. Just like in Shabbat, when it says shamor chamor, it means all animals, as it says explicitly. Anytime it says shor v'chamor, it means all animals and birds. So that's the derivation of this idea. Okay, what could that potentially be in tension with from what we said earlier? You know, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Let's keep going, and then I'll raise the question when it's more fleshed out. Okay, this halacha also appears in the Mishnah in Kilayim. Okay, in Perek Chet, Mishnah Bet. So it says Kilayim be'emayim be'ema. V'chaya im chaya, be'ema im chaya, v'chaya im be'ema, tmea im tmea, u'teora im teora, tmea im teora, u'teora im tmea, asurin lachrosh v'limshoch u'lenhig. So here it's talking about the charisha, right, which is the plowing, and it gives a list of all the different combinations that are asur, right? So the Mishnah here clearly agrees with the Mishnah in Bava Kama, right, that it's not exclusive to any particular category, but it means all different types. Be'ema, chaya, chaya, be'ema, and it adds what you guys mentioned before, teora im tmea and tmea im teora. Right? Now, why does it state those? Those are not in the Mishnah, right? The Mishnah doesn't go out of its way to talk about tamei and tahor in Bava Kama. So why in Kilayim does it mention tmea and teora? It's a good question. We'll see shortly, perhaps, why. The Rambam sees a lot of significance to that. In the Terush HaMishnah, he says the following. כשאמר כלאי בהמה אינן אסורין אלא מלערביה. So he says, when the Mishnah, right before the Mishnah that we just read, previous Mishnah, it says, when it comes to mating to animals, that you can't do that. אמר שאינו זה אלא לבהמה עם בהמה או חיה עם חיה או שאר. מה שיסדר. So the Rambam basically reads, I didn't bring the previous Mishnah, but he breaks up our Mishnah into two, like a Reish and a Seifa. When it says Be'ema and Be'ema v'chayim chaya v'Be'ema and chaya v'chayim Be'ema, so he says that clause is a reference to mating animals, which was the previous Mishnah's topic, and that those are all asur. Right? I can't mate any animal with any other animal. He says, but aval Be'ema tme'a im teora u'teora im tme'a. But then at the end of the Mishnah, when it says pure with impure and impure with pure, יש בה תוספת על איסור ההרוואה, והוא שהם אסורים לחרוש ולמשוך ולהנהיג. That the Rambam claims that the isur of charisha, of plowing two animals together, applies only to an animal that's tahor with an animal that's tameh. Min Torah. Okay? וזה עניין שאחר כך, שאמר כתוב, לא תחרוש בשור וחמור יחדיו. ואמרו שעניין יחדיו, רוצה לומר לחבר ביניהם וליחדם על זה, על איזה דרך שיהיה לחרישה וזולתה, ומן השור וחמור ניקח ראיה על כל שני מינין, אחד טמא ואחד טהור. And he says, ואיסור זה מן התורה, אבל מדרבנן, אסור כמו כן החרישה וזולתה, משאר מיני כליים, כמו שנתבאר בבבא קמא, שהוא אומר אחד השור ואחד כל בהמה. In other words, the Rambam, he understands that in Bava Kama, when the Mishnah says, for all these different categories, it doesn't matter what the type of animal is, it's asur no matter what, that's midarabanan. Okay, for the Rambam. The only prohibition min Torah when it comes to charisha is mating an animal like an ox and an animal like a donkey, which means tahor and tameh. That's the only prohibition min Torah. Midarabanan, it includes everything, just like the Mishnah Bava Kama said. So that's how the Rambam understands these two Mishnayot, okay?
He splits the Mishnah at the end here.
Yeah.
And Torah and Torah.
Exactly. He splits the Mishnah at the end there, right. When he says, Torah and Tme'ah, Torah, Tme'ah, Asurin lachrosh v'nimshoch le'anhig, it's talking on a Doraita level, and it means only those last ones, right? Whereas all the rest are referring back to the previous Mishnah on the Torah level, but that's talking about mating. Okay, so that's how the Rambam reads it. I think what's bothering him is that there is this strange difference between these two Mishnayot. That why would I specify over here Torah and Tme'ah when it comes to Charisha? Okay, not everyone agrees with the Rambam. If you look at Tosfot Yom Tov in his commentary on the Mishnah, Perush Rav Vadim Ratanur, I think Yalfinan Shor Shomi Shabbat. Okay, so he brings his Perush on the Mishnah here to be identical with the Perush from the Mishnah in Bava Kama. No, he's not bothered by this. He says they're saying the same thing, the two Mishnayot. Okay, this one adds Torah and Tme'ah at the end of the list, and that one didn't. But they're teaching the same thing. בסוף פרק קדם מסכת בבא קמא, שם פסק טמאה וטמאה ותורה וטמאה אינם אסורים לחרוש ולמשוך אלא מדרבנן. וזה דעת הרמב"ם בפירושו ובחיבורו. Excuse me, I was confused before. That this perush that he quotes here is consistent with the Rambam, who says סובר שור וחמור מיהו דווקא מן התורה, היינו טהור וטמא, והראש חולק עליו. But the Rosh argues with the Rambam, and the Rosh says that even midoraita, plowing is asur for any type of animal. That just as shor and chamor are lav dafka in any sense, in all other cases, they're also lav dafka by plowing. And the fact that one is tameh and one is tahor, it doesn't matter. It's not interesting on a Torah level or on a Derabanan level. And Tosfot Yom Tov adds his own point here. He says, "V'nira li ra'ay lidvarav min Yerushalmi v'tosefta." I thought this was actually quite clever. De la'el. So let's read it first, and then we'll see his raya. So the next source, Talmud Yerushalmi. Isi ben Akavya omer, asur le'ilkov al gabei pirda mikal v'chomer. Okay, so Isi ben Akavya argues you're not allowed to ride on a mule. Pered, pirda. Because it's a mule is a product of kilayim, right? Mule can't have children, it's a product of... So why can't I ride on a mule? ומה אם בבגדים שאת מותר ללבוש זה על זה את אוסר בתר ובתן, בהמה שאת אסור להנהיג בה זו בזו, לא כל שכן שאסור לרכוב עליה. Right? In other words, you're not allowed to plow them together or to lead them, so why should I be allowed to ride it? Right? Huh? That's his chidush. So then look at what the Gemara, the Yerushalmi, questions him with. He says, so you're saying I'm not allowed to ride a mule. Okay, I understand I'm not allowed to mate mules, but if there's a mule, I would think I should be allowed to go ride on it. Why is that violating it? So he has his kal v'chomer. But now the Gemara says, V'aktiv v'erkevu ish al pirdo vayanusu. So this is from David HaMelech. Yeah, the story of David HaMelech, that he and his people, they got on their mules and they fled. So you tell me David HaMelech didn't care about this kal v'chomer of Isi ben Akavya? So the Gemara answers, I didn't understand what this means. En lemedin min ha-malchut. So you don't derive from the malchut halacha like this. I'm not sure what that means. But then it got even more interesting. V'haktiv v'yirkavtem et Shlomo v'ni al pirda asher li. That when David HaMelech, right, at the end of his life, there's this intrigue where they come and they say, Bathsheba comes and pleads with him to anoint Shlomo before Adoniah comes and takes the throne. David HaMelech agrees and says, go take Shlomo HaMelech and anoint him while I'm still alive. So everyone knows he's the next king. He says, put him on the mule. And that's how you'll know that he's king. But didn't you just say that you're not allowed to ride on a mule? So what are you putting Shlomo HaMelech on a mule? So the Gemara answers, now, the problem with the mule is that it's a product of kilayim. So just like I'm not allowed to mate them, I'm not allowed to ride them because it's kilayim. But this mule was created mishesh t'mei breshit, so it wasn't kilayim because it was created a mule. So then I avoid the issue. I don't know. But so that's what the Yerushalmi says. So Tosfot Yom Tov says, okay.
Even though it's a mule
also, if that species existed, then...
What do you mean?
If the species already existed by Sheshis Mebreshis, then it's not a kilayim animal.
Meaning there could have been one mule, and then other mules were.
That's from Lord of the Rings. That's both in nature.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it's an I think there's a lot of aspects of that answer that are interesting, but yes, I mean I hear what you're saying. You know what that reminds me of? Actually, just reminded me. There's this machloket right in Masechet Shabbat. There's a famous machloket in like the whole idea of science and Torah, and it says like, are you allowed to kill a lice on Shabbat? Right. So the machloket in the Mishnah. Are you allowed to kill a lice on Shabbat? Lice are very, very small, annoying animals. Right. So Rabbi Eliezer says no, and the Chachamim say yes in the Mishnah. You're allowed to kill a lice. Why? I'm not allowed to kill animals. So and then the halacha is like the Chachamim because they're the majority, which means you would be allowed to kill a lice. Because they say yes. Why do they say yes? So all the Rishonim say because it's not because they're too small. Min avir. They spontaneously generate the lice. They're not animals that are born from people. The issur of killing animals. It's yesh me'ayin. The lice appears. The lice appears. So then the argument against that is that if it appears, if it just appears and disappears, so then, like the Achronim say, but then the lice that we have, we know now scientifically that doesn't happen, right? They don't just spontaneously generate. So we're allowed to kill those lice. It's a question, like what the halacha should be. So,
Mr. Ellenmeyer in whatever.
What?
Science, he proved it.
No?
That's
what I mean. Yeah, right. Right. But that's a recent thing. So there's an argument in the Achronim that say it can't be the Chazal were wrong. So they'll say it used to be that there were lice that spontaneously generated, but they don't. That didn't happen anymore. Nishtanu ateva. So then there's Natan Slifkin right from Beit Shemesh. So he said, but if these are lice that spontaneously generate, in other words, they appear yesh me'ayin and disappear. So how could you ever know that they? In other words, they never like existed to begin. In other words, they're just like they come and they go, and they come and they go. So there's no idea like teva changed because they were never like. There was never a process for them to come into like be born to begin with. So how can you ever prove that it? Anyway, so that just reminded me of that with like this mule that just like pops into existence. Anyway, it's not really related at all now that I blabbered
Super
about
related.
that. אתה צודק.
One of them is this?
לא, הם לא.
זה לא?
אבל אתה יודע מה? שלמדנו לפני כמה שנים שיש דעה ששואלת בסיפור בשמואל א', אני חושב, כשהפלישתים לקחו את הארון, אוקיי? ואז הם החזירו את הארון והישרנה הפרות. והם שמו את זה על העגלה, ואז הפרות איכשהו ידעו מעצמן איך לכוון את העגלה חזרה לבית שמש. בית שמש, כן. אז השאלה איך הפרות ידעו, זה היה נס. אז יש דעה שאומרת, הפרות היו מששת ימי בראשית גם, כי זה פרות של נס. זה לא מופיע במשנה באבות. אני חושב, הרדווה שם הוא כותב שאחד מהדברים שיש במשנה באבות, יש 10 דברים שנבראו ששת ימי בראשית, אחד מהם זה האתון של בלעם. אז הוא טוען, זה אב. כאילו, האתון של בלעם כולל כל הבהמות שנבראו באיזושהי נס לצורך שעה. אז גם אותן פרות, ואולי עכשיו גם את הפרדה של שלמה המלך. קיצור. Good, that was good, Pilpul. Okay, Al Kol Panim. So what does this have to do with what we were just talking about? So if we go back to the Tosfot Yom Tov, so he says, V'nira li, raya l'dvarav al Yerushalmi, v'tosefta dela'el, sheikshu mikra de David ubanav, בפרד, שהוא משני מינים ששניהם טמאים. So he says, a pered is a mule which is born from, what does a mule come from? Which animals? חמור וסוס, נכון? ששניהם טמאים. So according to the Rambam, 2 animals that are טמאים, the isur to be machrish with 2 animals that are טמאים is only asur midrabanan. And Isi ben Akavia's Kal v'chomer is if I can't ride them, so if I can't plow with them or lead them, I certainly can't ride on them. But according to the Rambam, for 2 animals that are tameh, that's only asur midrabanan. So why would the Gemara even bring a proof from that against David HaMelech if it wasn't asur yet? Because it's only midrabanan, right? So he says, therefore, Raya lidvarav, like the Rosh, who said that even mideoraita tameh and tameh is asur. It's not only tameh and tahor that are asur. All animals are asurim, even in the Torah. Okay? Which I thought was a clever argument. Whatever. Okay. All right. In the last kind of 5 minutes here, so what I want to now look at is, we talked a lot about this halakha of charisha. You're not allowed to take a shor and chamor. Okay, and we saw the Rambam says it maybe means on a Torah level specifically tameh and tahor. The Rosh says it means all animals. But if you look at the perushim on the mitzvah itself, right, the Rishonim that are commenting on the Chumash, not only do they not say that this is just an av for all animals, and not only do they don't even say like the Rambam that it's not all animals, it means just tameh and tahor. But there's an inyan of it being shor v'chamor, that the specific animals are what the halakha is referring to. Kind of in very different to what we saw in the halachic kind of frame of mind. So Rashi brings the halachic midrash, right? He says, "Hu adin lekol shnei minin sheba'olam, hu adin lanigam yachad kshurim zugim bo'olachat shum masa." So Rashi says, that it includes all types of animals for charisha, for aval, what we saw basically, like the Rosh, and it means all animals. But the Chizkuni Chizkuni summarized nicely opinions I saw also in the Ibn Ezra and other commentaries. He brings 3 reasons for why there's a mitzvah that you're not allowed to plow with an ox and a donkey together. So he says, number 1, she'ashor ma'aleh gera tamid ve'ochel. Right, the ox chews its cud, so it's always eating. Right, it's always redigesting its food. Ve'achamor eino ma'aleh gera, but the chamor, it eats and then it's done. So what happens if you have a chamor and a shor that are plowing next to each other or walking next to each other? So the chamor looks over at the shor and he sees that he's constantly eating. The chamor is like, I'm hungry. Okay? That the ox is eating and the donkey is suffering. Okay? So one reason why it's asur to plow with a shor and a chamor together is because of that. Now this I could still read into what we said before. Why? Because the difference between chewing cud and not chewing cud is a siman for Tumuad. Right. In other words, it could be that this, I could still argue, this is lav dafka shor v'chamor, but rather animals that are ma'aleh gera and animals that are not ma'aleh gera, i.e. tameh and tahor. But not in some, like, ruchani sense of tameh and tahor, right? In the sense of, it happens to be that animals that are tahor are ma'aleh gera, and there's tzar ba'alei chayim as a result. It's very, like, practical, okay? The second explanation of Chizkuni, davar acher, lefi she'ashor melech bebe'emot, v'al dmuto kisei hakavod. The ox is the ultimate, prized animal. V'chamor be'ema bezuya, whereas the donkey is a disgusting animal. Ena zivug na'ah, right? It's not a good shidduch. It's not appropriate to use such a chubad animal with such a nebuch animal to plow together. Okay?
זה דווקא שור.
Biduk. This is a dafka shor v'chamor, right? Because I can have an animal that's tameh, like a sus. I wouldn't say sus, and I don't think I would say sus and chamor, you have this problem, right? So here it's dafka shor v'dafka chamor. And his third reason is also, v'davar acher hachamav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu al kol ma'asav ve'en koach hachamor kekoach hashor, right? This is, I think, the one that I remember learning is the classic explanation, right? That, the donkey's going to suffer because he can't pull as hard as the ox. He's not as strong. So if they both have a plow on them, it's also tzar ba'alei chayim in a sense, but it's dafka shor v'dafka chamor. Again, if I had a sus and a shor, that wouldn't necessarily be the case. So here you see the Chizkuni and the other Mefarshim are saying, no, we're talking about shor and chamor. It's totally not what we saw in the Mishnah, which says shor and chamor is klal upat uchlal, and it's telling me, that I just like ma shor v'chamor af kol be'ema chayvov. And just to kind of wrap up, so the Baal Turim, in his commentary on this pasuk, so he says, Lo tachrosh b'shor v'chamor, he says, tahor v'tameh. So the reason behind it is tahor v'tameh, not the reasons that the Chizkuni said. And then he adds, Remesh shelo yishtatef tzadikim masha. So he says, why is it asur to be machrish shor and chamor together? So it's not tzar ba'alei chayim, excuse me. It's not an issue of the zivug. It's not an issue of their strengths. But rather it's to teach me a lesson about how I shouldn't mix Tumah and Tahara, right? The ox and the donkey are emblematic of that idea. One is the Tameh, one is Tahor. I shouldn't mix. Lo yishtatef tzadikim mashat. Tzadik should be careful, right? I shouldn't go be mekarev in the middle of Siberia. I should be in my Dalad Amot of Halacha. Right? The Tzadik should according to the tzaddik should not be mishtatef with the Rashaim, right? He should protect himself from them, right? So,
is it an argument that Eov is saying that it's immoral to have tzaddikim and Rashaim in the world together?
okay, so how does this tie back to Eov? Okay, say it again.
Is it trying to say that Eov is arguing that it's immoral that God puts tzaddikim and Rashaim in the world together, that they're so different, it's like they're playing together?
So that what you said is similar to the idea I wanted to kind of argue another layer to the thing of Eov to tie it all back. So you guys said earlier what I think is the pshat, which is just like shor is tameh, chamor is shor is tahor, and chamor is tameh. They don't choose that. So too, tzaddik and Rasha don't choose that. But I think also based on what we've seen, that the fact that the shor and the chamor are tameh and tahor, that teaches me something about how, like, Eov is bothered by the fact that, like, lo tachor shor v'chamor yachdav. Right? Like, don't plow them together. What does that mean? It means that you shouldn't create a world, Hashem, where you have some who are shoros and some who are chamos. It's more than there's no free will and everything is determined. It's like saying to Hashem, what kind of good God creates a world where you have the shor and the chamor yachdav? Right? And the Torah commands us not to combine them. But you built a world, you created a world where they're next to each other and they're always interacting. There's a tzaddik and there's a rasha. Where's the justice in that? Everybody should be tzaddikim. Create everyone a tzaddik. Right. That's how I want to argue. What?
And the same for the other two things. Why did you create Gehenom?
Right. Why did you create Gehenom? Why did you create Rashaim? Right? You created this world. And that's another layer I want to argue to. Yov's Ta'ana. And that's why it says specifically Shor v'Chamor. Based on what we saw, maybe kind of take it to the Shitat, the Rambam, as opposed to the Rosh, where really what the Charisha, the Shor v'Chamor Yachdav, is saying Tameh and Tahor. And the reason is like the Balaturim, that there's something about plowing Tameh and Tahor together that's problematic. There's an issue with it. And the Torah warns us against it. So Eov is turning that on. It's Ki'ilu Eov is saying here to Hashem, Lo Tachrosh Shor v'Chamor Yachdav. But you did that when you created the world. Aren't you violating your own Yisur that you commanded us with? That's what I want to argue.
Shkoyach, mí turn it off. Shkoyach.